This is incredible legislation that they have worked on, and I'm really proud of their effort. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Governor. Good morning, everybody. First, I'd just like to recognize the members of the Business and Commerce Committee and thank them for their diligence, hard work, attention to detail, and great input in fashioning legislation. This is a starting point of powering Texas forward. But before we begin to lay out the 9 bills that are going to be presented today, I'd like to first recollect and point out the good work that was done last session. Senate Bill 2, Senate Bill 3, and Senate Bill 2154. That changed dramatically the composition of the ERCOT board and the PUC board, promoted oversight, coordination, responsibility between those regulatory agencies of the Railroad Commission and the PUC and ERCOT, as well as the electric generation industry and the natural gas industry. We improved and mandated and put in place penalties for weatherization, the mapping that is being done, as well as the overall makeup and running of the ERCOT market. Looking forward, though, there is more to be done. We have got to address the operational flexibility and the resource adequacy needed to power Texas into the future, to make sure that homes are heated and that businesses are powered for years and decades to come. The first bill I'd like to point out is Senate Bill 6. Senate Bill 6 ensures that more power will be on the Texas grid. It ensures 10,000 megawatts of net new generation, enough power to power 7.5 million homes. It does so by establishing the Texas Energy Insurance Program. This program is a true backup program, an insurance on our grid that Texans can count on. That's why people buy generators for their home. The same reason that Texas needs its own backup generation in times of crisis, when weather is bad and the heat is up or the temperature is freezing. This proposal puts new steel in the ground, ensures more electrons are flowing on our power lines in times of critical need. That's the first part of this bill. A second part supports and maintains our current dispatchable generation through the establishment of a state-backed, low-cost loan program that will help maintain, restore, and keep in operation current dispatchable generation here in Texas. This is not dissimilar to the SWIFT fund that helps stabilize and enhance water projects across our state and has been so successful. I'd like to again emphasize this is not building a capacity market. It is an insurance product. These power plants that would be built would be last on and first off when called upon. The energy-only market has been very successful here in Texas in keeping costs down, but it is again important to have a backup system so that Texans can be reassured that we have the power necessary in times of crisis. That's Senate Bill 6. Senate Bill 7 addresses the market distortions due to federal tax credits targeted at less reliable generation, which gives those less reliable generation assets an unfair market advantage over reliable assets. Reliability comes at a cost, and for too long that cost has not been shared equally between intermittent and firm generation. This bill brings balance back to the market, helps level the playing field by making sure everyone is equally contributing to reliability through instituting a firming requirement, a reliability requirement, in a non-discriminatory manner between dispatchable, non-dispatchable, and load-serving entities on a cost causation basis. The bill also has a second component as well. It improves market signals by the addition of a new ancillary service, the Dispatchable Reliability Reserve Service, the DRRS, which is a day-ahead ancillary service, 2-hour on, 4-hour runtime, targeted at dispatchable generation, the type of generation that Texas needs to balance out its grid. There are now 7 other bills. I'd like to highlight several others. There's a bill to protect our market with market protections. The independent market monitor and the PUC will be targeted to address potential violations and enforcement actions by enhanced reporting criteria. That's Senate Bill 2010. Senate Bill 2011 addresses the voluntary mitigation plan protections. It updates these voluntary mitigation plan requirements to protect against market power abuse in the ERCOT wholesale market. Our energy-only market is transparent, effective, and should be free from abuse. Both of these bills go a long ways toward improving those goals. A 5th bill, Senate Bill 2012, builds off the good work of the PUC regarding their proposal, for which they have voted on, the Performance Credit Mechanism, the PCM. Although there are good attributes of the PCM, we think it is important to add guardrails and provisions that ensure that any rate increases are manageable and go directly toward improving reliability through dispatchable generation. And finally, the 6th bill I'm authoring, Senate Bill 2013, is a grid infrastructure protection bill. In today's climate of cyber and physical attacks on electric grids, it's now more important than ever that we ensure and take the necessary steps to protect our grid from sabotage and hostile foreign powers. This bill hardens the security of our Texas power grid and puts in place necessary protections to prevent exposure from attacks on our electric grid. I'd like to recognize Senator Campbell for her work last session on the Lone Star Infrastructure Protection Act, for which this legislation builds upon. I'd like to now recognize Vice Chair King, excuse me, to
From Parker County.
from Parker County,
From Parker County.
to highlight several other bills. But before so, I'd like to also say, having Senator King come over from the House, that it's important that we work in a bicameral fashion, a bipartisan fashion. We do so over here in the Senate. I'd like to recognize Senator Johnson, Senator Zaffarini. We're going to get this done for the people of Texas. This is not a partisan issue. This should not be a bicameral House-Senate issue. This is an issue for Texas and Texas's future. I look forward to working with Chair Hunter and all the members of the House to make sure that we have the power necessary to power Texas homes and businesses for generations to come.
Thanks, Chairman. Don't feel bad when you get recognized for 12 terms as King of Parker. Every time you're being introduced, Tan Parker, and I've been cursed with that forever. So my bill, first, I just want to echo what the Chairman said. It is rare when you see Republicans and Democrats and House members and senators work so collaboratively on a subject, and that occurred so much last session, and it's already off to a really great start this session and works with our counterparts in the State Affairs. I'm really excited about Chairman Hunter being over there and the leadership he's going to offer in trying to put together a real package on this that's not a partisan issue, something that just we need for all Texans. That said, I've got 3 really simple bills to explain, but they're really profound in their effect. The first is SB 1287. If you go home and you get your electric bill this week and you open it up, there's a line item on there every month, and that line item is for transmission and distribution, because every mile of transmission line that's built within ERCOT, that is paid for by the consumers. It's not paid for by anyone else. It passes directly through to the consumers on every home bill and every business bill. And because of that, there's no incentive for someone building a new generation to build it near the people that they're trying to deliver that electricity to, or even to build it near the transmission grid that they have to interconnect with. And so that ends up adding tremendous cost that really, again, gets paid by the consumers for every new power plant and really for every kilowatt of electricity that gets delivered. So, for example, last year I know of one 310 megawatt plant that came online or is coming online, and just the interconnection cost to run the power lines 13 miles from that generation to the grid is $50.1 million. I know of another instance in East Texas where simply tying on a new power facility 5 miles away from the grid was $25 million. It adds up to billions and billions of dollars of cost for consumers. So SB 1287 simply says that the PUC is going to set a limit. It is going to set a cap, an average cost that Texans will pay when new generation is tied into the grid. And everything above that is going to be paid for by the company that's building that power facility. And that will be a tremendous incentive to better site locate those instead of going out and looking for the cheapest land, which often ends up in a very remote area, to try to site it as close as you can to the transmission that's already there and as close as you can to the customer you're trying to serve. So that's SB 1287. The next very simple bill is SB 2014. And I'll confess that I did not know this was still law, but in Texas, I thought it had phased out long ago. In Texas, we still pay a direct subsidy from consumers to renewable generation facilities for the power they produce. Well, that may have been necessary and a good idea back in 2001 or 2003 when the renewable market was really just very immature. But it's a really mature market today. I mean, upwards of 50,000 megawatts of capacity in renewables. So there's no reason at all that Texas customers, electricity customers, should be paying a subsidy, a state subsidy for renewable energy. So this eliminates that renewable energy subsidy. The third one is SB 2015, SB 2015. And it simply says that, again, the chairman had mentioned firming up, trying to kind of level the playing field between how much renewable we have and how much thermal, how much dispatchable, ready to go at any time electricity we have. And this simply requires that beginning in 2024, that at least 50% of all the new generation that's built in Texas, that it must be dispatchable, meaning it must be electricity that will turn on regardless of whether the wind's blowing or the sun's shining or whatever else may be happening. It's ready to go electricity. So again, SB 2014 simply says that starting next year, that at least 50% of all the new generation built within the ERCOT area, that it will be dispatchable, ready to go electricity. And with that, let me turn it back over to the chairman or the lieutenant governor.
Any other senator like to speak? Any comment? Senator Zaffirini? Anyone here? All right. We'll take a couple of questions.
I have a question about the DRRS. That was something that was kind of floated by that recent Basil White report. So I mean that seems like you're kind of going against the performance credit mechanism. Are you basically saying to the Public Utility Commission that PCM is dead?
Absolutely not. PCM is a valid idea that they voted on, put forward, and I believe we need to, again, look at. If you look at Senate Bill 2012, it addresses some of the concerns of the PCM, but the DRRS ancillary service is complementary. We have a lot of ancillary services in the current structure, and the DRRS, again, is a day ahead, 2-hour on, 4-hour runtime. That is a niche product that fills a certain segment targeted toward dispatchable generation that we need in our grid. And so, again, it's complementary. It is not antagonistic to the PCM, and I believe they work in harmony.
Does the 2-hour, 4-hour, that to me, reminds me of battery storage. Is that why you pick those particular things?
Well, most battery is 1 or 2 hours, not 4-hour. And most battery can turn on if, like that, right? So 2-hour on, 4-hour run is what that product is. So it's more of a dispatchable, more thermal generation. Although batteries, if they have that capacity, should be able to avail themselves of bidding for and receiving credit for the DRS.
Senator King, I have a question about Senate Bill 2014. Since it would require, I want to make sure I'm understanding it correctly, would it discourage then renewable facilities from building new generation facilities?
They don't need any discouragement. They've got a ton of encouragement. They have a very, very large federal subsidy. They also have certain benefits for dispatch and other things that a thermal, like a nuclear or coal or gas-fired plant don't have today in Texas. In fact, I'll be a little off on these numbers, but I think if you look at over the next few years, what's in the queue is something like 37,000 megawatts of renewable, as opposed to about, I think, 6 maybe megawatts, 1,000 megawatts of thermal, of natural gas. So they've got a lot of incentive. This is just a subsidy. If subsidies are ever good, they are only good when you're trying to help a startup, brand-new technology market, which is what wind was, and solar certainly back in the early 2000s. And today it's just no longer necessary. And again, even if Texas ends its renewable energy credit subsidy, they've still got a lot of federal subsidy coming in.
On a similar note, I want to ask about Senate Bill 7. You described it as leveling the playing field against what you call unreliable energy versus reliable energy.
Intermittent and non-intermittent.
Is it so? Can that be interpreted as saying that you want to focus more on dispatchable energy rather than renewable energy? And if so, is that going to?
That's absolutely correct. I think it is important that we state the facts, and certainly renewable penetration is significant. And when it gets too high, it causes permutation because of the variability and lack of performance in critical times. And so we need that dispatchable generation to balance out and assure that we have a grid that's performing in times of critical need, when the weather is extremely hot or the weather is extremely cold. And so putting in a firming requirement, a reliability requirement, not just on renewables, but on dispatchable, non-dispatchable, and load would be one way of doing that. In addition, the bill also addresses by implementing the DRS, which is targeted toward dispatchable generation as well.
So to follow up on that, I mean, as was described earlier, the renewable energy market is mature, I believe was the word used. But should we not just say that that's what the future is for Texas? We've got companies that are wanting to invest in renewable energy here.
We had to have generation that performs when it's critically necessary. And that's dispatchable generation that can be counted on when the wind is not blowing and the sun is not shining, and when you have weather that is extremely cold or extremely hot. And you look at the performance of dispatchable and non-dispatchable assets during crises, it's absolutely critical that we re-level the playing field and balance out that market.
Senator, these incentives will take years to actually have an effect. How long do you foresee, once these bills are passed, it taking for the production tax credit to be successfully balanced out?
It would take years, yes. The production tax credit, augmented by what was recently passed in the federal legislation, is dramatic, and it certainly incents more and more solar, more and more wind. And so we're closing in on 50% of our portfolio, generation portfolio here in Texas, being renewables. And that has certainly cost advantages. But again, we need to focus on reliability and resiliency. It will take years, but firming requirements, changes such as transmission firming, changes such as the addition of a DRS, targeted dispatchability, is over time will turn the dial back toward a rebalancing between dispatchable and non-dispatchable assets, wind and solar, non-reliable versus reliable.
One more question, Yes, yes.
Thank you for your time.
Sure.
Do you think that the Texas legislature should pay the $3 million in settlements to pay the Attorney General and Hoxton's whistleblowers?
I'm happy to take your question. That's not what we're talking about today. Let me just close with this. Listening to your questions, which are all very good questions. In plain English, we have about 85,000 megawatts available to us today. And about 30,000 of those, I'm giving you round numbers, are wind and solar, mostly wind. On a really bad summer day that's hot, or a very cold, icy, freezing winter day, we need between 69 and 70-some thousand megawatts of power. So if you have 85 minus about 30 for renewables, we have 55 to 60,000 megawatts. Not enough natural gas or coal or nuclear. Not enough if the wind stops blowing and it's nighttime. In 2000, about 2% of our grid was renewable. Now, as the senators mentioned, it's close to 50%. This summer, for example, we have 2,000 more megawatts coming on. Only 40 watts are natural gas, 1,960 are renewables. We will soon, in the next 5 to 10 years, be at a level where 60% or more of our available power is wind and solar. We do not want to go the way of other states that have overbuilt to the detriment of the dispatchable needs. So renewables, look, we're fifth in the world. There's the United States, there's China, there's Germany, there's India, and there's Texas. We have invested heavily in renewables, but now it's time to focus on dispatchable. And one of the key issues that they talked about, firming, means that right now, if you're a natural gas plant and you can't deliver, you have to go out on the market. But if you're a windmill and the wind's not blowing, you don't have to do anything. They have to play on the same level playing field as dispatchable moving forward. That's how you get incentives of investment. The last thing I will say, I don't think it was mentioned, we're going to set up a fund similar to the SWIFT fund we did for water. And we've had a lot of talk about the surplus this session. One of the best ways we can invest our surplus is to create a SWIFT fund of low-interest loans to those who will build natural gas plants. We will save Texans money by doing so. I talked to one of the many companies that would bid to come in here in an open bid process to build plants, and I said, how much would it cost on the market today to borrow money? And they said 6 to 7%, a lot more than just a few years ago. If they borrow money from the DOE, Department of Energy, maybe 3%, but a lot of federal strings attached. But we could loan them money at 1%. So if they're building a plant and they have a 7% borrowing cost compared to a 1%, that's a tremendous savings which they can pass on to the ratepayers. So, as I listen to the chairman and the vice chairman and all these senators who I've talked with, these people are really smart behind me. They've learned a lot about this industry in the last 2 years. We all needed to get up to speed. And I'm so proud of their work. And as Senator King said, working with Todd Hunter in the House, we're going to put forth a really smart plan for the future of Texas. And it will take several years. If you started tomorrow to get steel in the ground and hook it up, it's going to take 2 to 3 years. That's why we have to start now. We can't wait another session to do that. That's 2 years further down the road. But we're going to build those plants, and we're going to have renewables that help keep our air clean and our prices low. That's why a lot of companies move here. And we're going to have dispatchable that guarantees, in the worst weather conditions, that when you hit that light switch, the lights come on. Businesses won't come to Texas, and citizens won't feel safe unless they know we have the dispatchable power for the growing needs of Texas, which are forecast to add another 15 million people to our state in the next 20 to 25 years, on top of the 11 million we've added in the last 20 years. So I'm proud of their work. Thank you all for coming. Great questions.
Thanks, guys. That's all we got.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Great.